I'm kind of glad we're starting up our long chew into Matthew here this morning. How many of you have been enjoying it so far? How many of you are just like, man, no, it's terrible? Yeah, nobody going to say that, but only half of you raised your hands. Which one is it? It's been so rich in a variety of different ways. I'm very thankful for how it is that God is lining things up. It is just so cool. Also, Jen, do I still need to? Okay, never mind. How about that? We were, the great news is we were short a couple of people over at Kids Ministry, but very thankful that people stepped in, so that's good. Those are two wonderful problems solved. I do want to generally thank everybody for their help. It has been so cool to watch people, as we've been making the move back here, step up and say, I'm willing to be a part of this church. Even a couple of weeks ago when I said, hey, if you call this church your home and you're part of our family, it was amazing to see how many people stayed behind for our family meeting. I'm just so stoked about just the buy-in that I'm seeing from everybody. And I'm really excited about the direction that we're going. You know, the vision of this church is to be a church that introduces people to Jesus. Jesus is amazing. He is awesome. He's meant so much to my life and done so many wonderful things in my life. I can't help but be compelled to introduce people to Jesus and to have a space and a group of people who are so on board with that mission of introducing people to Jesus. And then not just introducing them to Jesus, but helping them learn their identity as well. That we, at our core, the ability that we have to remain steadfast for the long term comes from our understanding that we are a child of God. And sometimes the world will tell us otherwise, and we'll take on identities that are never supposed to be our original identity. But out of that sense of understanding who it is that we are in Jesus, there is the ability to live this life for the long term. And then inspire people to make a difference. Challenge people to make a difference. God created you in your mother's womb with a very specific set of gifts and talents and abilities, and he placed you on the earth in this place at this time because he wants to do something with your life. He wants you to make an impact with your life. You were created for a purpose and a plan. And each of us needs to figure out what that is, or we just kind of waste our lives. And this is the vision of this church. Usually I start off with a terrible joke at this point, and people whine and complain about it like little babies. I'm just kidding. But I had a rough week this week. It was a difficult week for a lot of people. I don't know what it was, if it was just the people that I was meeting with and what it is that was going on in my life, but it was just a really difficult week. My uncle Martin died, my mom's brother, who was so special to my mom. He died this week. We put Alexander on a plane yesterday to go to YWAM. Alex's friend got turned back from the border. Totally just absolutely religious persecution because he was a part of YWAM. They said, no, I'm sorry, we're not letting you across, turned him back. Fortunately, we were able to put him up in a hotel for the night, and he rebooked a flight for the following day. We created a bunch of kind of like letters and other things to send with him. And fortunately, even though there was some interrogation, they let him through this time. Alec went through the same kind of grilling yesterday. It was kind of annoying and frustrating. Also met another mom at the airport yesterday who put her son on a plane because he's going to join the army. There's just been a lot of tears and difficulty this week. Even trying to get my message printed off this morning. The photocopier started playing this music, which was really confusing. And I just kind of realized it was the paper jamming. I know, I couldn't help it. I still had to get one in. I couldn't help it, even though it was bad. We still got to look at the positives. Today we're starting a brand new kind of series this morning, a brand new series called Authentic Faith. Authentic Faith. We'll be working our way through Matthew 7, which has a lot to say about being real in a culture that is anything but real very often. In this chapter of Matthew, it's the final third of the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus here really kind of drills into what it is that following him really looks like. What it is that it looks like for us individually, what it is that it will cost us, what it is that following him really looks like and really doesn't look like. And as you heard, he starts off Matthew 7 here with what following him doesn't look like. He gives a stern warning to those who are hypocritically kind of condemning other people. And he begins with this: judge not, and you'll not be judged. This is probably one of his most famous sayings. Almost everybody in the world will probably be able to quote that and know that that is something that is a saying, right? It's also one of his most misunderstood words. Some people think that it means that Christians shouldn't speak out against what is wrong, or take a stand for goodness, or take a stand for holiness. That's not what it is that Jesus is saying at all. What he is saying is when it comes to looking at the lives of others, we have to proceed with caution. One of the biggest criticisms that non-Christians have against Christians is that they're way too judgmental. I've heard people say that Christians think they're better than everybody else. I've heard people say that Christians are always telling everybody that they're going to go to hell and that they need to stop doing this and stop doing that, and they're always trying to make people feel guilty. And I just don't buy it. I don't believe it. It is absolutely true that I have met one or two people over the 22 years that I have been a follower of Jesus. I've met some sour Christians who are self-righteously smug, but they are so definitely minute and in the minority. The overwhelming majority of the Christians who I have known and who I know, and as I look around this room, are merciful and forgiving and encouraging and loving. Sometimes when people accuse Christians of being judgmental, to be honest, I think they're really expressing their own sense of guilt. I heard a story about a guy who was driving down the highway with his wife. And they're tracking down the highway, and every once in a while she'd go, "Honey, you just need to slow down, careful of your speed." You bring the speed down to begin with, and then it slowly creep up. Why are some of you looking at your husband right now? It would slowly creep back up, right? And then sure enough, the lights come on in behind. The Mountie pulls him over, writes him a ticket, gives him the ticket. They begin driving down the highway again in dead silence. A fog in the air. She didn't say anything. He didn't say anything. Until finally, he yells out loud, "Enough! Are you going to be harping on this the whole time?" Even though she didn't really say anything at all, he just knew that he was guilty and was playing it over and over again in his head. I was at a local restaurant chatting with someone about Jesus, and a woman at a nearby table said, "Please, don't start talking about religion here. I'm not in the mood for a guilt trip." I said, "Sorry, we're just having a private conversation about Jesus, not trying to give any guilt trips or anything. We just love Jesus, love talking about him. He loves us. He's awesome. We're not trying to make anyone feel guilty." And she said, "Well, I just don't want to hear religious talk while I'm sitting here drinking my shooters." People are sensitive about the battle that is inside us in the area of right and wrong. People are sensitive about it. They don't want to be condemned. They don't want to be judged. And for this reason, man, as believers, we have to exercise extreme caution when dealing with others about the area of right and wrong. In Matthew 7, 1-6, Jesus teaches us how to make a stand for holiness without being judgmental. He teaches us how to avoid the sin of hypocrisy and at the same time help others discover the truth. In fact, the main point of my message this morning, I think, really is how to help others get the specks out of their eye. Meaning, how to help other people improve some area of their life. The question is, can you do it without being holier than thou, self-righteous, a little smug? Can you do it? I think you can. And that's what today's message is about. In fact, this sermon could also be titled, The Difference Between Intervening and Just Interfering. It's how you look at others and how you look at yourself while you look at others. One night, Jody and I were in bed sleeping about 10 years ago. All of a sudden, we hear this screaming. And Alexander is screaming his fool head off. He used to have night terrors, so it wasn't uncommon. But we're looking around for him. He's not in his bedroom. We can't find him anywhere. And he's sitting on the toilet, just screaming, "Ah, my eyes!" Like, what the heck is going on? And he's literally in a dream, having this thing about his eyes, screaming about his eyes. And there was no consoling him, no talking him down. And he's like throwing punches at us as we're trying to reach in and grab him. Don't worry, son, it's going to be okay. No, my eye. And I'm like, please stop throwing punches. We need to have a look. And we pry open his eye, and sure enough, there's a tiny little dog hair in his left eye. Like the most minuscule thing. Took us about 10 minutes to find it. Finally just kind of gently rubbed it out of there, got it out of there from him. Then he's still screaming, "Ah!" Finally, we're like, "Alec, just pick him up, throw him in bed, leave him there. You'll be fine now." I think there is something, we oftentimes look at this passage and just focus on the logs in our own eye, which is super important. But a speck in somebody's eye is super damaging. It can create a lot of pain. And there is a sense of duty for us as Jesus followers to actually deal with the things that are in our own eye so that we can lovingly reach in and help people who are in a ton of pain in their lives remove the thing that's going on inside of theirs. But that means a ton of work on our part ahead of time. We need to help people get the speck out of their eye. But when it comes to dealing with other people's faults, Jesus teaches some principles that have to be in place ahead of time. First of all, if you are not on the jury, don't try to reach a verdict. If you aren't on the jury, don't try to reach a verdict. What do I mean by that? It's very simple. If it's not your judgment to make, don't make the judgment. There are some areas of our lives where we do need to make certain judgments in order to make the right decision come to fruition inside of our lives, in order for us to come to the right conclusion in regards to a few things. Maybe if you're a boss and you have to hire somebody, you do have to make some judgments. Whether or not we'll allow our children to go to a specific party, yeah, there's some judgments that have to be made. Whether or not we're going to lend somebody our car, we need to make some judgments about that person before it is that we put the keys in their hand, right? Whether or not we'll give money to a certain charity. We're stewards of God's money, so we better make sure that we know how it is that it's being handled. That's why Jesus said, do not judge by appearances, but judge with the right judgment. That we are supposed to judge. That we are, so to speak, there are certain juries that we are supposed to sit on, and it is our responsibility in those situations to make a right judgment. However, in Matthew 7, Jesus is talking about a different kind of judging. He's talking about making a judgment against somebody when you're not even on the jury. In other words, making a judgment against someone when it's none of your business. From time to time, I'll hear somebody say, I don't know if so-and-so is really even going to heaven. I just want to slap them in the nicest of way, in love. And say, yeah, you better make sure that you go to God with that and make sure that he bars the pearly gates against them because it's not his decision to make, it's yours. No. When Jesus said, do not judge others so you'll not be judged, he's talking about making judgments that are none of your business. Asking if you're supposed to be on the jury is an important first step. And when it comes to dealing with other people's faults, pause first and say, am I supposed to even weigh in here? There's a second thing we have to do to avoid self-righteous hypocrisy. Don't criticize a problem or a person unless you're ready to be a part of the solution. Do not criticize a problem or a person unless you're willing to be a part of the solution. Although this never happens at this church. Some church attenders have a bad habit of criticizing areas inside of the church where they're not involved. For example, people who have no connection to the children's ministry don't like the way that the children's ministry is being done. So what do? Well, I can guarantee you they don't volunteer to help out to make it better. They just want to criticize. Or the music is too loud. Why don't we have a drummer this morning? Blah, 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 blah. Like to criticize what it is that's going on. Do they offer to join the sound team? We could use another 2 or 3 people. Nah, I'd just like to complain about how loud it is. That doesn't happen here. Other places, for sure. Because it's easier to criticize than it is to get involved. It's the same with your children, right? It's the same with your spouse. It's easy to criticize and complain. It's easy to talk about, to cast judgment on them. It's easy to show disapproval when they don't measure up. The greater challenge, though, is to enter into their problem and encourage and inspire them, work side by side with them to develop better habits in their lives. Before you judge others, before you condemn others, before you criticize others, man, look at yourself first. Fix your own life before you try to fix anyone else's. And as you look at yourself closely, you have to ask yourself, am I in a position to help before I speak these words? When you ask yourself that question with a sincere heart, 9 times out of 10, you're probably just going to shut up, which some of you need to do, and me too. Because what will happen is when we start to look at ourselves, we'll discover maybe there is a plank that I need to deal with. The French novelist Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. I killed it, didn't I? I'm so sorry. I need Marcel to actually give me that, how that's said. Anyways, he said something really cool. He said, I have no right, by anything I do or say, to demean a human being in his own eyes. What matters is not what I think of him. It is what he thinks of himself. And to undermine a man's self-respect is a sin. That's what your general kind of disapproval of others does. It's easy to do. It comes naturally to most people. It's something that we see in the world around us all the time in media. It's natural to be disapproval and critical of the people around you because that's the world we live in. And the problem is it destroys potential in the people around us. Let me tell you something. Disapproval is cheap. It's easy. Anybody can do it. It takes no talent, takes no character, takes no wisdom. Anybody can show disapproval. Don't be anybody. Demand more from yourself. Step into somebody else's problem and help them see those problems go away. The third thing that Jesus tells us to do to avoid self-righteous hypocrisy is limit your advice to do as I do. Limit your advice to do as I do. He didn't pull any punches here, where he's like, you hypocrite! Exclamation point. First get rid of the log in your own eye, then you'll see well enough to deal with the speck in your friend's eye. Notice it says you are supposed to deal with the log in your own eye so that you can help the friend deal with the speck in theirs. Just because you have a log doesn't mean that I got a log. Oh, well, I got a log here. I can't tell people about what it is that's going on over here because I got this log. No, deal with the log. Get rid of it. Change. Ask the Holy Spirit to adjust what it is that you do and how it is that you live. Why? So that you can actually be loving and help that other person with the speck. It's not that Jesus wants us to abandon the idea of helping somebody get better. It's that he wants us to do it with integrity. The person whose attitude is do as I say and not as I do, you've met those people before. I've been that person before. You've all been that person before. Those do as I say, not as I do, those people have no credibility with the people that they're trying to help. This is why some parents have no influence over their children. When your children know that you called in sick to work when you really just wanted a day off. When you tell the ticket clerk that your child is 11 when they're really 13 just because you're cheap. When they witness you telling a white lie to your spouse. Man, all of these things, you guys, add up. And you are painting a portrait that truth does not matter, that right and wrong doesn't matter. And your kids will follow in your footsteps. Whenever you advise or correct someone, if the underlining theme is not do as I do, then you have no right to what it is that you're saying. You know, I realized long ago that if I don't control my tongue, I'm not in a position to demand that somebody else controls their tongue. I still struggle with this at times. I realized that if I'm not on time, then I can't scold somebody else when they're not on time. This makes parenting and any other leadership position that you currently find yourselves in really difficult. Because the crazy thing is, Christians are actually called to be a light in the world. They're called to be salt in the world. They're called to be leaders of culture and leaders of the space where we currently find ourselves, inviting people into kingdom around us. But here's the challenge. James 3:1. Not many of you should become teachers, my brothers, for you know that we who teach will be judged with greater strictness. If you want to give any kind of corrective advice in order to avoid self-righteous hypocrisy, make sure the underlying theme to your message is do as I do. Jesus concludes this passage with a statement that we can't ignore. It always kind of like comes out of nowhere almost, where it says, and don't waste what is holy on people who are unholy. Don't throw your pearls to pigs. They'll trample the pearls, then turn and attack you. Yay. What did he mean? And why does it relate to the subject of judging? Well, he's saying, don't waste your words on those who won't listen. You know, it's a sad truth that some people simply don't want the speck taken out of their eye. They don't want your advice or anybody else's on how to improve their life. There's no point in trying to persuade them otherwise because they're not about to listen to anybody. Their lives may be a mess, their marriage may be falling apart, their kids may be rebellious, their business might be completely going down the drain, they may be destroying their relationships around them. Any number of personal disasters will be going on inside of their life, but they're not about to listen to anybody. They'd rather be wrong than confront the truth. And Jesus is saying you have to use discernment and instruction before you begin to engage with those people. Some people just don't want to hear. And of course, many people hear constructive advice and they gladly receive it because they recognize it to be a pearl. And when somebody comes up to me and they give me a little pearl of wisdom on how it is that I can improve my marriage, on how it is that I'm speaking to my wife, I want that. Come, speak that to me. I need it. It's a pearl. When somebody can show me how to be a better father, man, I desperately need that. Give it to me. It's a pearl. I want it. When someone can show me how to be a little more like Jesus, oh man, pearl. These pearls create value in our lives, and we should receive them gladly when somebody gives them to us. These pearls, they up the value. They increase our value in the kingdom. Why? Because we're people who are moving and advancing towards God and godliness. Some people, they don't want pearls. They don't want to hear the truth. They don't want correction. They don't want their lives to be better. As the Gospel of John says, the people loved the darkness rather than the light because their works were evil. This is why we need to proceed with caution before trying to fix anybody else's life. Some people just don't want to be fixed yet. And usually you can tell. The good news is you can tell within about the first 7 words out of your mouth towards them. If you're speaking to them about something that they should maybe change, if they look down, if they cross their arms, if they take a step back, just shut up and walk away. Does that make sense? But if they're open, if they're looking you in the eye, if they're like, oh, then help them get that speck out. Jesus is telling us before you point out somebody else's faults, make sure you're ready. Make sure they're ready. Otherwise, you're not intervening, you're just interfering. How do you make sure you're ready? Ask yourself a few questions. You might need to take a photo of some of these or write them down. Ask yourself, am I on this jury ahead of time? Is any of this my business? Ask yourself, have I examined my own life? Am I in a position to offer help and advice or correction here? And then ask yourself, am I telling this person to do as I do? Not just do as I say. If you're ready and they're ready, then you have the opportunity in order to help somebody improve their life. How do you know if they're ready? Like I said, you'll know. Pray. Ask the Holy Spirit. Watch what it is that's going on. Don't be thinking so much about what it is that they're doing wrong and what it is that you need to say that you stop looking for how open they are to what it is that you're about to say. This is what it comes down to. When it comes to dealing with sin, we need to look at ourselves longer than we look at others. It's pretty simple. Look at ourselves first. Longer. This is the way that we avoid self-righteous hypocrisy. It's the way that we help others without being a busybody. It's the difference between intervening and interfering. Your first concern is me. What's going on in my heart? What's the reason that I want to challenge this? Have I dealt with my own stuff first? We are called to help the world. We are absolutely called to help people who are freaking out, screaming on the inside of their lives because it is a train wreck. And so it's not I've got a log, I'm out. That isn't what it is that God is saying here. No, it's deal with your log. Deal with your speck. Deal with your issues. Get things figured out with the power of the Holy Spirit. Get the teaching that you need, get the learning that you need, and then help this world that desperately needs you. Let's pray.